Aloha. Welcome to the Walking in Aloha, Let's Talk Story podcast. We're so glad to have you here. At Como Mai. Now here's our podcast host and award-winning author, Michelle.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to the Walking in Aloha, Let's Talk Story podcast. Aloha Nui family, Ohana, this is Michelle. Ebalaroza Kawano, and we are here today with Dr. Ben Clinton. I know that maybe 2025 felt super heavy for a lot of people. Maybe it was confusing, stretching, even painful. Maybe it took more from you than you planned to give. I know it did for me. It was just really hard. But hear me, just because the year has been hard does not mean that God is done writing your comeback. That is why I invited this special guest today for today's New Year's episode. I know it's just the day after Christmas, I know, but it was something that I really wanted to do. Dr. Clinton, he is someone whose entire life's work has been about turning impossibilities into impact. We are joined here today by this leadership strategist, a turnaround specialist, and one of the most grounded, compassionate, and transformational voices in education and organizational leadership. Dr. Clinton has spent more than 2 decades rebuilding failing campuses, restoring trust in discouraged communities, and shifting cultures and helping teams rise again when everything around them said, "You're done." And I know that there were so many times in this year that I can say that I felt like I was done. But he went from reviving an A-rated school system to leading statewide healthcare reform, to creating pathways that give students a future. His message is timeless and powerful. The message is, it's never too late for a turnaround. And family, if there's someone we want speaking over our new year, it's him. So I just want to welcome today Dr. Ben to our stage, our platform. Aloha and Ekumomai, Dr. Clinton. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm fantastic, Michelle. It is a pleasure to be here.
So before we step into our Aloha Always questions, I'd love for you to set the stage for us. For those meeting you for the first time today, could you share a short snapshot of your journey, especially the part that shaped your belief that no story, no year, no season is too far gone to rebuild? Because like I said, this year, I know not just for me, but for so many people, it has been hard.
Well, I want to start off by saying what an honor it is to be on your show. I've seen your work. I love what you're doing, and I'm just honored to be a part of it. And so, like you mentioned, I've spent 21 years in education. I think that I guess the story that I can tell that really points at what your viewers are listening for probably is my first role in school administration. I think back to when I was moving from a teacher to a high school principal. I was the assistant principal for 10 days, and that turnaround that happened in that first group, and I'll tell the full story, I'm sure, at some point today, but it had a lot to do with believing in the people that were around me and trusting that they were going to believe in me, and seeing a school that was really downtrodden, one of the lowest performing schools, one of the toughest schools in the state of Texas. Within that school, a group of 10 boys that really were having a tough time, probably the 10 biggest behavior problems in a school that turned into my leadership club and were one of the most critical pieces in turning around a school and making a community proud. I think what really prepared me for that, when I think back, was, my own turnaround. I shared with you earlier that I got a chance to live a little bit of a dream. I graduated from high school, went to my dream school, Rice University, and got a chance to play football. But back-to-back injuries, a knee surgery, and then another predicted knee surgery really set me off and derailed me. I ended up dropping out, but going back to Rice and the people who helped me along the way and getting help from completely unexpected places, from being homeless and not knowing where my next meal was going to come from and having people step in to help me with that, leading to me being able to graduate, I think gave me the frame of reference to where I was ready to help those kids, or I was ready to help that school that was struggling the same way I had struggled 6 years before when I dropped out. I looked at it the same way, and so for me, it was just kind of paying back what had been given to me, and I think that everything since then has really been about that. It was that one school system, and then I coached principals using the lessons that I learned from that and from the people who helped me overcome what I was going through when I dropped out of college, coached principals to take their schools from failing to A rated and then moved on to other areas. And actually now I'm actually working with small businesses, and it's the same principles that I learned in those two real experiences. Just over and over again, the same things apply, and that's how real transformation happens.
Wow, that is so good. You know, there's that one saying, I might get it wrong, but to whom much is given, much is required, right?
Yeah.
And that is so good. So thank you so much for sharing that. Your journey alone carries so much hope for anyone stepping into a new what, like feeling behind that discouraged or unsure on how to start over, right? But it is so good to have that. You can start over. You can start over. It's always that possibility. You never have to feel behind, discouraged, or unsure of how to just start over. So let's start right there with the foundation of Aloha. For those of you who are new to this podcast, Aloha isn't just the hello, goodbye that you normally hear. It's not just a greeting. For me, it was when I asked for God to help me write my story, my book. It was a framework that God gave me that He walked me through during the toughest time of my life, and it was through domestic violence. It became my foundation for healing. It became my purpose. It truly became my voice and the work that I do today. So I have been now blessed to share my story with people all over the world. Leaders, creatives, and survivors. I sat here and cried when I was speaking to someone in Spain. You know, I was like, that is just so amazing. But I learned something amazing that I never knew until that day, that everyone walks in aloha in their own way. Different languages, different cultures, different experiences, yet same heart. Aloha is absolutely like universal. It is spiritual, but aloha is how we show up in our lives, not just for ourselves, but for each other. And so I'm so excited, Dr. Ben, to hear how you walk in aloha, especially in the work that you do in leading people and turning things around. So let's dive into questions I sent earlier.
Yeah.
I do walk in aloha with everyone. So it is the affirmations and actions, the leadership and love, the overcoming obstacles, health and healing, and the acute awareness that God walked me through. So let's start right there. You lived a real turnaround story. So from dropping out of Rice University, like you mentioned, to returning, rebuilding, and graduating. As we step into 2026, what are affirmations or small actions that someone can take to begin writing their own comeback story?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's a really good start. When I think back to the lessons that I learned in that school turnaround, I go back to that so much because that was transformative to me. And when I'm teaching principals or when I'm guiding business leaders, even now, or even my own kids, I talk about a framework that I built out of that. And I tell folks to lead with courage, clarity, and care. I talk about the three C's. I'm probably not the one who came up with that. I'm sure others use it, but try to teach others to live it. And I think back to that comeback from dropping out of college. I was out and I was doing okay. I was working, but after about a year and a half, I snapped and I realized that I wasn't living to my full potential. And I actually remembered the saying that you said earlier. I had family members who had told me going into college that so much was expected of me because so much had been given to me. And that was what got me to step up and actually go back. But I remember being so nervous walking in. I walked to the office of the vice president of student affairs, and I had these butterflies in my stomach. And I walked up to this heavy wooden door and I pulled it back and I just walked in. I didn't know what was going to happen. I had left and I really hadn't done anything. Like I had just walked away from Rise, didn't do it the right way. But I walked in to see Dr. Camacho and I talked to his secretary and I just kind of rambled and stumbled through what I was trying to say. And as I was talking to her, I saw this guy come out from his office and walk up to me. And I turned and it was Dr. Camacho. And my heart jumped up in my throat. And Dr. Camacho says, "Benjamin, welcome back." And he takes me into his office. And for me, I was so nervous going in, but I go back to the message to somebody writing their comeback story. All of that happened because I took that first step. Because and I don't want to call myself courageous, but it was just to not wait around and to not worry and to stop being nervous because I really, really was scared of what they were going to tell me without a really good reason. But so often our fears or our nerves are without that big reason. But I walked in and he was accepting. And none of it would have happened without taking that first step. And so the message is to move forward with courage. You got to take that first step.
So good. And like what they say, right? Fear, false evidence appearing real,
Yeah.
right? That's what they say. So, like you said, you walked in and you were so scared and everything like that. And sometimes we hold on to that and we're like, oh, we don't want to do it. But what if it's just that first move, that first step? So good. So, when someone feels like they've already failed the year, how do they speak hope over themselves again?
Yeah. I think I've failed enough times that I can speak as an authority on this. But it's not
Awesome.
but it's I think it's the way we look at it. And as a coach and as a teacher, I've tried to instill in those that I'm coaching or teaching that sometimes we win and sometimes we learn. And I steal that I think from John Maxwell. He's got a book. I didn't come up with that again, but it really is a mindset that failure is not final. Just
Mm.
because I didn't accomplish what I wanted to, well, you know what? I don't always have control over the outcome. I have control over what I do. And if I didn't win, I can go back and I can reflect and I can think of how I can do better and I can go at it again. And so somebody who feels like you failed the year, you didn't fail the year. You learned some lessons. And so what can you do to take those lessons you've learned and to move forward and to do better? And you know what? You might slip again and you might fail again. What can you learn and what can you move forward? And it was something that was instilled in me by coaches along the way. And I was lucky to have that. And I think that I've been successful instilling that in others, in students and in coaches and in teachers and principals to have that mindset to just failure is an event, but it doesn't define you. It's something you can learn from.
That is so good. So it's like in failing forward, you fail forward, you just keep moving forward because it's in those lessons, right? In learning those lessons, I think it's when you don't learn. It's when you do something and you're like, stop right there and you don't learn anything from it. Then you can't do anything. But it is in those lessons. You have to learn from those mistakes. Then you move
Well,
forward.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if it's starting off, things are hard. Almost anything you try to do is hard the first time. I've got a 9-year-old, and that's one of the things we're working on in that, hey, when you start, you're going to be terrible. Well, let's get past the being terrible phase right now so that you can be
Yeah,
good later on. And we're learning that. And I'm, I'm a lot older than 9 years old, but I'll be honest, I'm still learning that too. But it's
exactly.
just, you gotta, sometimes you gotta fail. You gotta get past that being bad at something now so you can be good at it later.
Right, right. Yeah, so like I just went to a retreat with Lisa Nichols and she always talks about taking those shots, right? Like you never talk about I don't know sports, so don't quote me on those basketball players that took those shots. You never talk about the shots that they've missed, but you know how many shots that they got, right? But What about those times of practice? All of those shots that they miss, right? And it's in those practice times, it's those mistakes, it's those, oh, I have to move a little bit this way, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. It's in learning that. So take those shots, take those misses, because it's in those, like you said to your son, let's get over the terrible parts because you got to get better. And the only way to get better is to keep doing the terrible parts. Yes, so good. Awesome. So L in Aloha is leadership and love. Not we, you've rebuilt entire school cultures, discouraged teams, broken trust, and low morale. What leadership lessons can everyday people use to rebuild their own inner culture as they head into the new year? Because, like I said, the year has been hard. And even in my own, like in the job and everything with the shutdown and things like that, I see that right now, where discouragement, trust, and that morale is low. So, how would you speak into that?
Yeah, and within that framework that I mentioned, I guess the book NCs, the courage and the care talk a lot about that for leadership. I think one of the most important things to make sure you don't forget is the clarity that moving forward, you should understand the problem. I approached approached issues in the school district and in businesses the same way you would approach a math problem. You understand the problem that you're dealing with. It when you strip away a lot of the noise and just understand this is the thing that I want to address. And when I'm coaching principals or dealing with businesses, actually even go back to the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. People will talk about that all the time, that 80% of your return is actually coming from 20% of your work, or 80% of your stress, 80% of what you're dealing with that's hurting you, it's coming from 20% of the negative. And so if you understand that principle and you get clear on, here are the things that I'm doing that are hurting me or that are keeping my business from being successful, or here are the things that I'm doing that are really helping me move forward, or here are the things that I need to do that will help me move forward, and put your focus on those things, then you're able to move forward. In the school district and turning around schools, it was that. It was focusing on the things that were going to get us to move forward. And for me as a leader, it meant sometimes I had to decide, what am I going to not do? What am I going to let go? What am I going to let go of? And so when we think about ourselves and our own personal lives and leading ourselves, how can we apply that? Well, how can we look at that 80-20 to our own personal life? What's the couple of things that I can do that'll really move me forward? What's that 20% of my time that gets me 80% of the results? And how can I put more of my effort into that? Or if I'm talking about my morale, what's that thing that I'm focusing on that's driving down my morale? What am I holding on to that I can just let go of? And so it's that becoming clear on where I want to go and how I'm going to get there, and then having the courage to step forward and apply it. And I think that if we do it, whether it's turning around a school district, leading your business, or turning ourselves around, that we can get clear on it and make big gains, whatever our situation is.
I love that. The 80-20 rule. That is so good. I have to remember that even for, like you said, for ourselves, right? Like, what is the 20% that we're doing? Because it's like that results 80%, right? Like
Yeah.
you said, the 20%. Say that again, because I'm
Yeah. So
messing it up.
80-20, the Pareto principle is 80% of our gains come from 20% of our effort. So in a business,
Okay.
it's 20% of your clients are making up 80% of your sales. And it's pretty universal at 80-20 principle. 20% in school districts, 80% of your discipline is coming from 20% of your student body. And sometimes it can be
Mm,
even a 90-10, but 80-20 is a safe universal number.
okay. So good. All right. So you often talk about showing up consistently and imperfectly. What role does love for people, for purpose, and for ourselves play in turning around a difficult season?
I think it's the most important piece. Moving forward with that, and whether you
Amen.
you call it love, or and for me, and I talk about it as care, is caring for your people. That's what I did when I stepped into that role, probably the most important thing I did was I cared for the employees that were there. I cared for those teachers. I cared for the students because I walked in not really knowing what I was gonna do. And I figured I just needed to make sure that I showed up and that I cared. When I built that leadership club with those 10 boys, I didn't have some great plan. I didn't have a workbook or a binder of all these great things I was gonna do with them. I said that I was gonna show up for those kids and I was gonna check in with them every day. I'd find them somewhere. I would make sure they heard from me and that they saw that I cared about them. But once a week, we were going to eat lunch. Low pressure. I wasn't going to lecture them. We were just going to sit down and they were going to see that somebody cared about them. That every week that I was checking in and every day we had some interaction. But I look back and I think it's because people did that for me. Well, I told you when I went back to college, Dr. Camacho let me in and he was so gracious in saying that my walking away from school for a year and a half would be, he said, let's call it a leave of absence, he said. But I went back in, and because I had worked, I wasn't eligible for a lot of financial aid, and I didn't have a scholarship anymore. And so I was back in, but I didn't have any money to pay for this expensive private school. Luckily, I got a chance to go back and work for the team for half tuition, but that half tuition didn't pay for an apartment or a meal plan. So I went in and I was sleeping in my car in the parking lot of the college, hot, humid Houston nights. And I was living off of ramen noodles because I could get 7 of them for $1. And every once in a while, a friend would sneak a burrito off of the buffet line for me in the cafeteria. And I laugh about it now, but it was a shocker when one of the cafeteria ladies came up to me. My friend had just gotten me a burrito, and Miss Mary, this cafeteria worker who used to say that she used to call me Sugar Clump when I was playing football. She used to tell me she made my burger with extra love because I needed all my energy, she said. But she came up to me and said, "Hey, Sugar, we need to talk. We know what you've been doing, sneaking that food. You can't do that. We can get in trouble." And I thought at that moment, I never thought about it as stealing food. At that moment, it hit me. And I thought I was in so much trouble. But Ms. Mary didn't report me. She offered me a job. Ms. Mary got me a job swiping cards at $15 an hour. And in the year 2000, 15 bucks an hour was solid. And she also made sure they gave me a meal plan. And it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week. I just had to make sure nobody else stole from the cafeteria anymore. But there was that level of care that she showed to me. It didn't benefit her at all. I can't call that anything other than love. It was somebody showing that care for me that made me sure that I needed to pay it forward to others. And when I was working with those 10 boys, I remembered Miss Mary and I thought about her and I treated them the way that she had treated me.
So good. We just started this and I don't know why they just started it now, but they're starting like this hospitality courses that we need to take, this classes at work. And I was like, what is all this about, right? And when I went to the class, it was just yesterday. No, the day before. And I'm sitting in the class and they're like, okay, so we need to start this. And as I'm listening, I'm thinking, this should be normal. This should be every day. This isn't something that we should be in a class for, because what I'm hearing is that you're telling us that we should treat people with more aloha, with more care, with more hospitality. And they were asking like, what is the difference between customer service and hospitality? And I'm like, it's kind of the one and the same. But if you think about it, hospitality is more like when people come into your house, you treat them with care, right? And I said, and everyone was like, that's the same thing. I said, no, okay. And I was trying to get everybody to kind of think I almost like trying to get people to think at a level where they could understand me. And I said, okay, I know retail, you go to a store, you go to a store, you go to a store. But when you go to a hotel, when you go to a good hotel, it's different, right? You're like, you want people to treat you better. You're going into, it's like hospitality instead of just going Nike. I don't know, there's difference, right? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, now we see it. I said, but if you think about it, we shouldn't be in this class, right? We should be doing this all the time. This is something that we should just be doing. And so they were like, yeah, but it is because not everyone does it. So like you're saying, people treated you in such a way where, like you said, you call it care, but people showed you that care. And it is love. It is love. It's the bottom line of caring. You can't care for something that you don't love. Yeah. Or you have to give from your heart. And so that is so good. I love that. So good. And so, like I said, to whom much is given, much is required. And so you were able to pay it forward. So the O in overcoming obstacles. Many of our listeners went through hard things in 2025, loss, financial strain, health challenges, emotional exhaustion. What is the first step in overcoming obstacles when someone feels completely depleted? What is the first step in that overcoming obstacles?
I think the first step in overcoming the obstacle is to believe, to find something to believe in.
Very
And that's
nice.
easier said than done, to be completely honest. I think back, the hardest thing that I've probably ever had to do was stepping into that high school principal role, not ready. 10 days of assistant principal experience, stepped in one of the toughest schools in Texas. And I acted like I was confident, acted like I was ready. My boss, I tried to not let him see me sweat. I walked into his office, say, yeah, just let me do the job. We need to move forward. But the first day of the job, I sat outside in the parking lot in my truck, and I can still remember gripping the steering wheel, and I looked down, my knuckles were white, literally, because I was grabbing on the wheel and my heart was pumping. I was so nervous going in and realized I didn't know what I was doing. And in that moment, I remember consciously deciding that, okay, well, if I can't believe in myself, I can at least believe in the staff that's in that building, because I know that they're capable. I know that these kids can do it. And I know that we've got the team. And so I got out of the truck, not ready to believe in myself, but ready to believe that we would find a way. Not me, but we were going to be able to do it. And so for anybody who's going through that tough time or has that obstacle, the first step is to find something to believe in. To believe in, if it's not you, it can be something else. It can be the we. It can be that I don't believe really that I've got all the tools, but I believe that I've got a higher power that's going to guide me in the right direction. Or I've got a family, or I've got a team, or I've got something. I've got the, whatever it is, just find something to believe in, and then you can move forward.
That is so good. One thing that I've learned, and even in my own coaching, is that sometimes you need to borrow the lens of someone else in order to believe in something, because sometimes you don't have it for yourself. And maybe when you were willing to meet with those boys, maybe they didn't have something to believe in themselves, but seeing you and your willingness to even be there for them and all of those things gave them that lens. They were looking through your lens at that time, everything, because I fostered for years, and there was kids that came into the home, and they went from home to home, and you get the report from not only their social workers, but from the previous homes. Oh, this is how they are. This is what they're going to do. This is this and this is that. And you're like, okay. And for me, I always was like, they come to me with a clean canvas. I'm not going to take all of this other stuff. And so that's the way that I always approached it. When they came in, I didn't want to bring all of that negativity with them. And it's like, you show me what you show me, but I'm going to allow you to borrow my lens for a little bit, And I think that's one thing that sometimes people need. Like, if you can see better in me, maybe I can do better for myself. And so when you were with them and you were like, I'm going to meet with them, not expect anything from them. I'm just going to sit with them, have lunch with them. And they're like, well, this person treats me like a friend, not like, because I think when kids are bad, like when I've heard it, you automatically see people come in and they already treat them bad, right? They don't even know them. They don't even know them. And they are like automatically treat them like the next person, treating them wrongful. And it's like, you don't even know me. And you're already treating me like this just because you heard it from someone else, but you didn't do that for them, right? And so that's why I'm like, that is so good. So overcoming
I'll
those
share
obstacles.
with you. They again, great memories with those 10 boys. I don't wanna sell the story that these boys turned around immediately and they were not angels. They still got in trouble. One of the funniest things that happened, we had a latecomer, a student who had dropped out, went to another school. We found him late in the year. It was March, and we had testing 2 weeks after he came back. We found him and brought him in and had him join my club because I had a history. I knew what his background was. So we put him in the club. And 2 weeks in, we were testing, and he had a reading and writing test to take. And before the test, I made it a point to greet every kid. I greeted every kid coming in the door most days anyway. And I made it a point to go to every class where kids were testing and tell them that I believed in them. I knew they could do it, that I loved them, that just do their best. And we were going to do great. And I knew that they would be able to pass it if they just did their best. And about an hour in, I'm going to call the young man Joe just so I have a name. Well, an hour in, I get a call on the radio that we had an incident. And I get called in, and they've got Joe sitting outside of the classroom, and they're telling me that Joe was caught cheating on the test, trying to cheat on the test, asking a girl. He passed a note asking a girl for answer. I said, Joe, what's going on, man? This is serious. You can get in trouble, but you can also get us into trouble. And he said, Mr. Clinton, you told me that you wanted us to pass that test. I haven't done anything for the past year. I haven't been in school. I didn't know any of the answers. I wasn't going to be able to pass that test. That was the only way I could have passed it. And so the kids weren't angels. And I'll tell you, Joe passed over the summer. We gave him some tutoring. I was a little bit proud of him for trying to find a way, but we can't cheat on a test. And so it was just an interesting part of the development of these young men and learning what's okay and what's not okay. Sometimes he thought it was completely the right thing to do to cheat on that test. And it wasn't like it was just part of us learning to act right.
Yeah. You know, you mentioning that. So him saying, well, you wanted me to pass it. And so this is the way that I was going to do it, you know,
Yes.
and I had to explain to my own children that when we had the foster kids come in, they asked me, Mom, why do they do the things that they do, like stealing? You know, like we have food. Why do they need to take food and hide it? I had to explain to them because that's the only way they know how, right? That's the only way they know how. So when they're asked to do something or when they think that is the best way for them to do something, that's the only way they know how. And so when he was asked to pass this test, he's like, okay, I figure this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this way. And
Yeah.
so the kids that came into the home, they were like, oh, this is how we get food. This is how we keep food. They didn't know that food was kept in the cupboard. And if you needed a cookie, you can actually go get a cookie without having to hide it under your bed, you know, things like that. And so I had to explain to the kids that it's not like they're wrong. It's just that it's the way that they think. And so they were just brought up that way. Now we have to try to help them to learn better and know that it's safe, that they can learn differently. And, you know, it was just a growing thing for not only my foster kids, but for my own children to know that, you know what? We can't look at them like they're wrong. They just don't know any better, right? So borrowing other people's lenses for a little while, it's okay. And that's the way that we get through things. So good. I love it. So I am totally lost. Where am I now? Okay. You've seen transformation in environments that seemed beyond repair. What gives you hope that a person's life, no matter what their year has been, is always redeemable?
Well, Michelle, I think you said it. I've seen it. I've lived it. I needed somebody to believe that I was redeemable when I went back to college. But I think the best and most impactful group to me was those 10 boys. I'll talk about them a lot because they really impacted me. I can remember one of them in particular. We went through that whole process, and these boys turned around, and I got to see them grow as students. And over the 2 years that it took for most of them to go from the junior to senior year and graduate, it was a great turnaround, but the most impactful was probably 10 years later. I was at an elementary school awards banquet with my daughter, and she was there, and it was the honor roll banquet, and she was getting a certificate. And one of my young men comes up to me and says, "Hey, Dr. Clinton, you remember me?" And what he was a kid who had raised hell in the halls. He was gang leader, had been graffiti all over the walls for half of his time in high school. And when he graduated, he was still a member of the gang. He was still not an angel by any stretch of the imagination, but he was turning around. He was there with his daughter, and he was there. He was wearing a nice shirt, tucked in a tie that didn't really match the shirt, but he was there with his daughter, and she was getting her honor roll certificate. I
Wow.
said, wow, this kid never went to a single honor roll banquet, never imagined he would do that, but he's a good dad. This is really what it's about. And so, from that kid who was causing havoc in the halls to raising his own kids to hopefully never. And I think, well, I still know the kid. I still know his daughter, and I got to see, yeah, they're not experiencing any of the things he experienced. So not only was he redeemable, but now he's passing it on to the next generation.
That is beautiful. I mean, we can change the legacy, the course of history for the next generation. And that is one thing that we can do. And for you to say that, like to see someone who's causing havoc to raising a child that you can actually see that, to see that the daughter is in the honor roll. So it's almost like you can see the fruit of your labor, and not a lot of people is blessed enough to see that. And so that is really amazing. I think that is like a gift to be able to see that, because I can say, not a lot of people are blessed enough to see the progression of that happening, but you were able to. So that is so good. That is so good. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Health and healing, the H in aloha. Sometimes we forget about like how important health and healing is, but we cannot do what we do if we don't take care of ourselves. And so turnaround requires healing. What did healing look like for you personally during your toughest seasons of leadership and life?
Yeah, I think it looks different for all of us. Me, it's always been quiet. It's not been in a group. It's been find that person who believed in me and moving forward. I can remember, and I somehow people picked up on things like that cafeteria lady who caught me stealing food and helped me with a meal plan. It was a similar situation for me. I told you that I went back to college and I was homeless. I was living in my vehicle, sleeping on a couch in the library sometimes when there were too many mosquitoes to stay in the car. And I'd been working for the school for the athletic department for the football team as an equipment manager, and it had been about 6 weeks in. And I remember my boss pulled me over to the side and he puts a key in my hand and he says, "Hey, this is a key to my office. Never there late, and I know that you stay and do some of the equipment maintenance sometimes. In case you ever need my office, it's got a couch, use it for whatever you want." And I was like, nobody else had a key to his office. I didn't even realize that he knew I was homeless, but he was aware that that became where I lived for the rest of the year. And so for me, it was accepting the help was what healing looked like for me. It wasn't some loud support group and talk out my problems, but it was a willingness to accept the help, to accept the person who offered me a meal plan, to accept the couch to sleep on. I mean, and I've seen it all sorts of different ways. I talked about those 10 boys. For some of those boys, healing was saying out loud what they had struggled with. Man, it was so important for some of those kids to be able to have somebody to just speak to. Hey, here's what I went through. I've shared it with someone. Now I can release it, or what. I don't know the whole process of that. I just know that I was there, and for them to be able to speak it out loud and to let it go and to move on from it was helpful for them. And then I saw it with teachers. So as a teaching staff, to become a part of this turnaround, well, a lot of healing had to happen for them too. And it was in how they were treating each other and supporting each other. And so I guess the biggest lesson is that it looks different. And for me, and I think it's important, and I would encourage others to, whatever it is that you have in your path, and whatever it is that your healing looks like, be willing to accept the help, be open to accepting the help, because I don't think any of us rise alone. I think
Mhm.
that the idea of pulling yourselves up by the bootstraps, man, I think that there are people there to help us. And yeah, we're pulling on our own and we're pulling hard. But if there's somebody there and there's somebody who will care, be willing to take it. And that's how we can heal.
That is so good. You know, in my toughest time, it was hard for me to speak out, because I knew that if he knew anything, if he got wind of anything that I was doing, it would be bad for me. So I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want to speak up or ask for help or anything. And it was one day when I was just going to the doctor. It was just for, I forgot what it was, like a frozen shoulder or something to do with my it was not even anything to do with the domestic violence or anything like that. The doctor looked at me and he was like, "Oh, do you want him to come in?" And I knew not to say no. You know, he always had to be in every doctor visit. Anything that I did, he had to be right there, because he never wanted me to say anything without him knowing exactly what I was saying. So he always had to be in there. So I'm like, "Oh yeah, you know, he can come in and everything like that." So he comes in, everything's fine. Then the next time I go in for the visit, the doctor literally looks at me and he looks at him and he goes, "You can wait outside." Doesn't even ask. And I'm like, "No, you can't do that," you know? And I was like, shoot, you know, but he was like, totally took control. He was like, "You can wait outside." And he closes the door and he goes, You're okay." I was shocked, like, didn't know what to say. I was like, "No, I'm now in trouble," you know? So we go off into the office and then he looks at me, he goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, I didn't know what he was getting at. And then he came like really close and he goes, "No, are you okay?" And when he said it in such a way I knew he knew. And I just broke down crying. And I was like, "How did you know?" You know, like that. Like I told him everything. I was crying. And he said, "I saw it the last time." I was like, wow, you know, that kind of thing, right? Like being able to see through the through the mask. True, but I had to be able to say, yeah, I needed the help, but they were willing to help me in such a way that kept me safe, kept it secret enough to keep everything safe. And that was my first step of getting out and getting safe. And they helped me through the whole thing. And it was amazing on how a doctor who never knew anything about anything could see it. So yeah, being willing to accept the help, and even when it's uncomfortable, when somebody, you know, being like when what was her name? The one who came up and said, "Sugar, I know what you're doing. You
It
gotta keep
was Mary,
swimming."
yeah. I'll never forget her. Yeah.
You know, like that, right? It could be so uncomfortable where you're like, you could have been like, "No, no, I don't know what you're talking about," and out
Yeah.
of there and missed all of that opportunity to help. Yeah. So that is so good. So glad that you took that help, because look at where it got you, all of that path that it led. And for me too, being able to open up enough to be like, okay, hard as it is, I'm going to be vulnerable enough to take this help and, you know, sleep on the couch like you did and accept the job and, you know, accept the help. And
No, because sometimes it's easier to be on the other end and say, "No, I'm fine. No, I'm
yeah,
okay. I
it
don't
is.
need anything." No, because I've done that plenty of times too, to my detriment, and to just say, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm fine," and when I really
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah. It's easier to do that. But look at how much better it was in the vulnerability to say, "Yeah, I know I was stealing this food, but I don't have anything. You know, I've been eating Simon, I've been eating ramen," you know, that kind of thing, right? "I've been living in my car," or, you know, that kind of thing. Like you have to be okay with not being okay. And I had to tell them, like when I was at the doctor's office, I had to tell him everything. I had to tell him the truth, that he goes, "I can have him escorted out right now." And I said, "No, you can't." because I have family living at home. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, I am that roof over people's head. I cannot choose to do this now and then mess everything up for everyone else. So I had to choose to stay in it to keep other people safe too. And so he was like, okay, I understand, but you still need to be safe. And so he helped me. I actually ended up seeing a psychologist. And I, at first, when I heard the word psychologist, I was like, no, 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 I'm not crazy. I don't need a psychologist, And he was like, no, what you do need is you need someone to continuously talk to, that you need to work things out with. And when I talked with her, she was amazing. She wanted me to journal. I actually was honest enough to say no, because if he finds anything that I'm writing, that would be dangerous. So she had me like journal things through a text and then send it to her and delete it. Things
There you
like
go.
that. Everything that was done so safe, yet it helped me out so much. She helped me plan things like an escape. I actually had a friend that was sending things to the mainland, sending things out, making a bank account, all these different things to help me escape, to plan an escape. And I was like, this is the craziest thing. It's like a movie. I was like, I am living this horror movie, but I actually did it in a way that I got out safe. And I would not have been able to do that if I didn't trust and accept the help when I needed it. So that is really good what you said about it looks different for everyone, and it truly does. But to be able to say yes
Mhm.
to the help when it's handed out to you. So, how can someone begin restoring their mental, emotional, and spiritual health so they can walk into 2026 whole and ready? I know that we already spoke a lot about that,
Yeah.
but how can you speak more?
I think what has impacted me the most as far as restoring mental, emotional, or spiritual health or really helped me grow has been caring for others. And
Mm,
so even when I was dealing with something, when I was caring for others, I could feel myself grow. And I look back to those 10 boys and I talk a lot because they were so impactful to me. Yeah, I made a difference for them. And yeah, I'm happy that I helped them grow and it helped them to succeed. And it was a real impact that I made on them, but they made a far greater impact on me. They gave me something that I've carried with me for 16 years, that I've been carrying the lessons and turned it into frameworks that I'm teaching others. And I can see how well I'm teaching principles and I can see them applying. And when I'm helping them, I'm growing spiritually and I'm getting better. And I'm able to say that it's helping me work through whatever it is that I'm dealing with. I'm stronger and more accepting of myself when I'm helping others.
so good. So the last A in Aloha, acute awareness. 2 decades in transformation work gives you a rare perspective. As we enter into a new year, what should people become more aware of in themselves, their gifts, their blind spots, or their potential?
Yeah. I wanna tell people that you have the potential for so much more. Give yourself the credit, be willing to step forward, and I go back to kind of the beginning story, the willingness to step forward before you feel ready. Somebody told me, "Yeah, readiness is a decision. It's not a state of being, it's not a location, it's just a decision." So, step forward. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need to wait for the right time or the perfect time. You just need to move forward and start to be great.
So good. You talk about the quiet power of people who step in at the right moment. How can someone recognize the people God is sending into their lives in this season? How do they know who to trust as they rebuild? I know that you had lots of people walk into your lives.
Yeah, well, Michelle, I'm glad that you bring this up, and it may not be the way that you're framing it, but I go back to that clarity piece. We do need to think critically and approach things with a healthy skepticism, because to be honest, not everybody's there to help you. And it's okay for you to be skeptical and to think critically and to open your eyes. I've seen in the business side of things, especially where it's kind of glaringly obvious that there are people out there presenting themselves as, I want to help you, and then using some high pressure, fast talking sales techniques to tell people that if you don't give me $25,000 for this program, you're selling yourself short. And I've heard somebody call people losers because they didn't sign up for their program. That's not somebody that God is sending to you to help you along the way, but there are people there to help. And you can see it when they're doing it, and it is not for their own reward. It's not for their gain. My old boss, him letting me use his office, he gained nothing from that. That cafeteria worker, Ms. Mary, she probably could have reported me and gotten me kicked out of school. And she instead stood up for me with her boss and people along the way stepping in to give you a hand up. But it is the truth that not everybody's there to help you. But here's the secret, that if you let somebody in, the truth is that you're still in control. You might get hurt. You might have somebody who steps in and tries to take advantage a little bit. And if you catch that, you can still move forward. You're strong enough to get past that. But be clear on what you're looking at, have a healthy skepticism, and accept the help. And if somebody hurts you or they weren't in it to really help you out, you can move forward and you can get past it.
Yes, you still can move forward. I understand that. I've been there too. You think that someone's there to help you, and you're like, not so, not so. Final question, the turnaround year. If you could speak one prophetic or empowering message over every listener right now, something to anchor them in for 2026, what would that be?
Yeah. I'll encourage all the listeners to move forward with courage, clarity, and care, to have the courage to step forward even when you don't feel ready, to be clear, to focus on what your goals are and stay focused, and be willing to let go of some of the things that aren't within that area of focus, and to care while you're doing it, to make sure that you care for the people around you and care for the people who are helping you. But even more than that, care for and help others so that they can move up this year. And I think all of us can rise together.
So good. Like they said, right? When the tide rises, all ships rise. So good. So good. Thank you so much. Dr. Clinton, mahalo nui loa for being with us today. That was so good. It just touches my heart. Your honesty, and your wisdom reminded us that comebacks are not accidents. They're intentional moments of choice. They're the places where resilience meets grace, and where God breathes new life into what looked finished. Hannah, if today spoke to you, hold this truth close. 2026 is not just another year. It is your turnaround year. Your year for alignment, your year for action, your year for aloha. Remember, aloha is a lifestyle. It's not just one and done. It's a lifestyle. Affirmations and actions, leadership and love, overcoming obstacles, health and healing, and acute awareness. And as you walk into your God potential year, your God potential life, keep expressing yourself. You were created by the Creator to be a creative. And family, your time is now. I know that the year is coming to a close, but it is now. So thank you again for joining us here on the Walking in Aloha Let's Talk Story podcast. My name is Michelle Ebalaroza Kawano. And mahalo nui loa again, Dr. Ben Clinton, for joining us here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Until next time, everyone, aloha always. Ahui.
Thank you for joining us here on the Walking in Aloha Let's Talk Story podcast. Before leaving, please hit that subscribe button. God's blessings always, and ahui ho.